Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Ken Hovind. I was a high school science teacher for 15 years, and now for the last 10 years I've been traveling around speaking on creation, evolution, and dinosaurs. How many new folks we have? This is the first session you've been to. Oh, you already missed it all. We started yesterday morning. I'll bring you up to speed a little bit of what we covered so far. The Bible teaches that God made the entire world in 6 days, about 6,000 years ago, and this timeline kind of illustrates the worldview that I'm talking about. The Bible says God made everything 6,000 years ago. 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. Noah built a big ark and saved all the critters on board. Before the flood came, the world was very different. The people used to live to be 900 years old. You won't live to be 900 today. And before the flood came is the time when the great dinosaurs lived. And then we covered how that Noah took dinosaurs on the ark. Probably babies, of course. Just be sure to get a pink one and a blue one. And they've lived with man all through history, and there's probably a few dinosaurs still alive today. Like Loch Ness Monster, Lake Champlain Monster, Mokele Mbembe in the Congo Swamp. We cover all that on videotape, number 3 of the series out there, if you missed that. But tonight I want to talk about lies in the textbooks. One of my hobbies has been to collect public school textbooks. I have a huge collection of them from many countries, many years, many publishers. I probably have the books used in your school here. If not, I've certainly got similar ones to the ones used right here in your school in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, there are many good things in the textbooks. I am not against textbooks, and I'm not against schools. And there are many good, godly public school teachers. My brother led me to the Lord. He's been teaching public school for 28 years. My mom retired from teaching public school. Most of the public school teachers that I know are sincere, dedicated, honest professionals. What I'm concerned about is the lies in the textbooks. The material they're teaching from contains things that is just simply not true. I've got a videotape called My Public School Presentation, which goes through all of the laws and court cases that I could find, 45 minutes worth, about what you can teach in a public school. Public school teachers need to be taught you can teach the Bible in your public school class. You can teach about creation. There's never been a law against that. And we cover all that on My Public School Presentation. But tonight I want to talk about lies in the textbooks. It has always amazed me, in my 15 years of teaching science, how that two people can look at the same thing and come to opposite conclusions of what they're looking at. Two people can stand there and look at Grand Canyon. One guy believes in evolution. He looks at Grand Canyon and says, wow, look what the Colorado River did for millions and millions of years. The Bible-believing Christian stands there, looks at Grand Canyon, and says, wow, look what the flood did in about 30 minutes. Now, how was that canyon formed? Was it a little bit of water and a whole lot of time? Or could it be a whole lot of water and a little bit of time? Sometimes there are two ways to look at things. I'll give you an example here. Anybody in the crowd know what this machine is? This is a veterinarian holding a strange-looking machine. Yes, ma'am, what is that?
Calf puller.
That's a calf puller. That's a what? A calf puller. Yes. Once in a while, a cow has a hard time having that baby calf. And so they get the calf puller out there, wrap the cable around the calf's leg, and jack the calf out of the cow. You get a few tons of pressure on there, calf will come right out, no problem. Well, this farmer was out pulling a calf one day. It was a breech birth. The back feet were coming out first. Not good. And so the farmer had the calf puller out there. He got the cable wrapped around the calf's back leg, and he's trying to pull the calf out of the cow. And a city slicker stopped his car to see what on earth is going on. And the farmer said, come here, man, I need some help. And the city fellow said, I don't know nothing about cows. He said, just come give me a hand, would you? He said, okay, okay. So the poor city fellow hopped out of the car and ran over and helped the farmer pull the calf. He never said a word. He just did what he was told. Well, about 10 minutes later, they're walking up to the barn, going to get washed up, and the farmer said, boy, I want to thank you for helping me. The city fellow said, oh, I was glad to help, glad to help. The farmer said, have you ever seen anything like this before? The city fellow said, no, sir, I've never seen nothing like this before in my life. The farmer said, well, do you have any questions? He said, yes, sir, I got one question. It's been bugging me for 10 minutes. The farmer said, what's your question? The city fellow said, how fast do you figure that calf was going when it ran into that cow? No, 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 no. We're not separating the wreck here, fella. Two people looking at the same thing, and one of them is getting the wrong idea of what happened. You know, the Bible warned us that was going to happen. 2 Peter chapter 3. Knowing this first, there shall come in the last days scoffers. Did you know there are people that scoff at the Bible? I deal with them on a regular basis. I attract them like a lightning rod. And the scoffers are going to walk after their own lust, and they're going to say, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were. That's a very important phrase. The scoffers are going to say, the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening. Millions and billions of years. The Bible says, for this they willingly are ignorant of. The scoffers are willingly ignorant. In the Greek, that means dumb on purpose. They're ignorant of how God made the heavens and the earth. We covered that already in videotape number 2 about the Garden of Eden and what the original creation was like. They're ignorant of the creation. And secondly, they're ignorant of the flood. And we cover a lot more about the flood on video number 6, about the Hovind theory, about the flood, what that flood did to the world. But one of the scoffers in the last days was a fellow named James Hutton. Now, James Hutton lived in the late 1700s. And you have to understand, folks, in the late 1700s, most people believed the Bible. Now, they were not all Christians, of course, I understand that, but they were strongly influenced by Christianity. And most people in the late 1700s believed the earth was about 6,000 years old. I mean, if you went to public school, that's what they'd teach you. God made the world in 6 days, about 4000 BC. That's what was taught in the textbooks. So most people believed the Bible. James Hutton came along and said, I think the earth is millions of years old. And if you understand the time frame, in the late 17 and early 1800s, there were many revolutions in the world. The German Revolution, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Polish Revolution, the Spanish Revolution. Basically, countries were trying to get rid of a form of government known as monarchy. They didn't want a king anymore. They wanted to run their own affairs with a democracy, the Laodicean age, mentioned in Revelation chapter 3. Well, good or bad, right or wrong, I don't know, but this was a time of many revolutions. And the Bible says to honor the king. And so some people thought the Bible stood in the way for their political objectives. And so they were looking for a way to discredit God's Word. And they decided to attack the flood account and the age of the earth. The creation, the original creation, what the world was like, how can it only be 6,000 years old? And evolution became a pretty popular theory long before Charles Darwin. Charlie's grandpa, Erasmus Darwin, really wrote a lot of the book that Charlie plagiarized and called it his own. So that was back in 1802 or 09 or something like that, 1802 I believe. So evolution was already being taught around the turn of the century from 17 to 1800. And this was a time of a lot of revolutions. And the textbooks will say, in the late 1700s, many people thought the earth was about 6,000 years old. Along came James Hutton and said the earth is millions of years old, and it got here by a process called uniformitarianism, which means the present is the key to the past. Well, sorry, James, the only reliable key to the past is really the Bible. But James Hutton's book had a very profound influence on a young lawyer named Sir Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell was a lawyer from Scotland. He hated the Bible. Somebody told me one time that they figured out if all the lawyers in the world could be laid end to end around the equator, we would all be better off. Charles Lyell, in 1830, wrote this book right here, Principles of Geology. In that book, Charlie Lyell, building on the work of some other guys, Stratus Smith and Steno and Cuvier and some of these guys, he really helped develop what's called the geologic column. Now, the geologic column was built in the early 1800s. And Lyell's book, which I have right here, is full of mocking the Bible. He always called it ancient doctrines and, you know, if you have sound philosophy, you can't believe the Bible, because obviously the Bible is, you know, crazy and it's not true. Over and over in his book, you see evidence of his mocking the Scripture. He said, men of superior talent, he's talking about himself, who thought for themselves. Now, kids, if you go to a secular university, I guarantee you will come across at least one professor who will have this same kind of mocking attitude toward God's Word. You will find them. Trust me, they're there. Lots of them. Charles Lyell mocked God's Word. He didn't like the absolute authority of thus saith the Lord. And so he mocked it all through. And in this book, Charles Lyell developed the geologic column. How many have ever heard of the geologic column before? They got the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic. Maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park. That's named after the Jurassic layer. Each layer of the Earth was given a different name, and it was given a different age, and it was given an index fossil. That's very important. We'll come back to that in a minute. But each of the layers was given a name, an age, and an index fossil. The geologic column is actually the Bible for the evolutionist. And there's only one place in the world where it can be found. That's the textbooks. They know that too. This textbook admits it. If there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. Did you know there is no geologic column? It's imagination. Now, it's true the Earth has layers. I'm not questioning that. I mean, I've been to the Royal Gorge, the San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, the New Madrid Fault. None of them are my fault. But I've been there, done that, have T-shirt. Okay? No question the Earth has layers. The question is, how did they get that way? Might be two ways to look at this, you know. How fast was that calf going? Anyway. It could be each of these layers is a different age, or it could be all of those layers were dumped off in one big flood. You see, if you had a worldwide flood, if the water was completely covering the Earth, the tides would become harmonic. We're just a few miles right here, folks, from the second largest tidal change in the world, right? I went and saw the first largest in the Bay of Fundy. Tide changed 102 feet in 6 hours and 20 minutes. That's the world's record during a spring tide. Now, if you had a world covered with water, there's no continents to stop the tides, so the tides become harmonic. They've estimated you would probably have a 200-foot tidal change every 6 hours and 25 minutes. That would cause thousands of layers of sediments to be deposited as everything is lifted and shuffled and settled. And things that tend to be sorted based upon their body density, the shape of their characteristics of their body, their mobility, their habitat, their intelligence. There'd be some sorting in these layers based upon other factors than evolution. People say, why are clams found at the bottom of the geologic column if they didn't evolve first? I say, well, clams are found at the bottom because they're already at the bottom when the flood starts. They're going to be the first ones drowned, right? We cover more on that on video number 6 about the geologic column and the sorting and all that. But it's no question the Earth has layers. The question is, how did they get that way? Many years ago, I was preaching in Union Center, South Dakota. Union Center is the middle of no place. It is right there. It's not even on the map. You can't get there from here. You have to start there and work your way out. There are 40 people in the whole town. 38 of them came to church. I don't know where the other 2 were, out pulling a calf, I reckon. But we had an awesome meeting. The preacher said, hey, Brother Holpen, let's go down to Rapid City, South Dakota. They've got a museum there with a bunch of dinosaur bones in it. I said, all right, man, let's go. So we all drove down to Rapid City. We walked in this museum. Real nice museum, by the way. The guide met us at the door and said, folks, I'd be glad to give you a tour. We said, that'd be great, sir. First place we stopped on the tour was a great big huge chart that is all lit up. They're really proud of that thing. It's behind glass, you know. The geologic column. And the guide said, now folks, this rock layer right here is about 70 million years old. My daughter was 12 years old. She said, excuse me, sir, how do you know the age of that rock layer? He said, well, that's a good question, honey. We determine the age of the layers by the types of fossils they contain. They're called index fossils. She said, thank you, sir. We walked around a few more minutes and looked at a few things, and the guide said, now, folks, these bones you're looking at here are about 100 million years old. My daughter raised her hand again. She said, sir, how do you know the age of the fossils? He said, well, honey, we tell the age of the fossils by which layer they come from. She said, excuse me, sir, when we were standing over there, you told me you knew the age of the layers by the fossils. And now you're telling me you know the age of the fossils by the layers. She said, isn't that circular reasoning? Chip off the old block. That guide had the strangest look on his face. It was almost as if he were thinking. He looked at my daughter. He looked at me. I wasn't about to help him. I thought, this is going to be good. I got to hear this. He looked back at my daughter and said, you know, you're right. That is circular reasoning. I never thought of that before. That poor fellow drove 50 miles one way that night to hear me preach in Union Center, South Dakota. The crowd swelled to 39. We set up a chair in the aisle. Afterwards, he talked to me for nearly an hour. He said, Dr. Hovind, is everything I believe about geology wrong? I mean, I studied this in college. This is what I teach. I said, oh, no, sir. Many things you've learned are absolutely right. You've learned the names of all the minerals. Boy, that's a good trick, folks. There's 1,200 minerals. Some have names about 4 feet long. I said, you learned the hardness test, the Rockwell test, the scratch test. I said, I like geology. But, sir, as far as the layers being different ages, yes, sir, that part's all baloney. Now, he doesn't dare quit teaching it because he'll lose his job. And kids, you might as well learn today, to some people in this world, money is more important than truth. And there are teachers all over America that teach evolution, even though they don't believe it, because they want to keep the paycheck coming in. They don't care if it ruins thousands of kids that go through their class and destroys their faith in the Bible. They want to keep that paycheck and those benefits coming in. Well, for you teachers like that, I have one word for you. It's called a coward. Our job is to do what's right. Regardless of the cost, you just simply do what's right. This geologic column is a joke, folks. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. And the evolutionists themselves admit it's based on circular reasoning. I'll show you. In 1830, Charles Lyell and some other guys made the geologic column. It was based on the number of clams they found in different eras. Strangely, little effort has been made to test this assumption. This failure leaves the method vulnerable to circularity. Here's a textbook where on page 306 they date the rocks by the fossils, and on page 307 they date the fossil by the rock. Very next page, and they don't catch it somehow. How's this for a quote? The intelligent layman has long suspected the use of circular reasoning in the use of rocks to date fossils and fossils to date rocks. The geologist has never bothered to think of a good reply, feeling the explanations are not worth the trouble as long as the work brings results. Circular reasoning. I can give you quote after quote after quote. Folks, they know it's based on circular reasoning. If somebody tells you they date the fossils by carbon dating, you tell them Kent Hovind said they're mistaken or they're lying. They date them by geologic position. They don't date them by radiometric decay. Potassium argon, rubidium strontium, lead 208, lead 206, uranium 235, uranium 238. That's not how they date them. Fossils are dated by the rock strata they come from. Circular reasoning. Radiometric dating would not even be possible if it hadn't been for the geologic column coming first. And the geologic column doesn't exist. Fossil, the way they date these things is based on circular reasoning. How's this one? The rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. Explain that one to me, would you please? Stratigraphy cannot avoid this kind of reasoning if it insists on using only temporal concepts, because circularity is inherent in the derivation of time scales. I'll tell you what, what's taught in our geology courses today wouldn't hold up 5 seconds in a court of law with a freshman law student going against it. It's silly. The charge of circular reasoning, this guy says, can be handled several ways. It can be ignored, not the proper concern of the public. What he's trying to say is, it's none of your business how we do it. Trust us, we're the professionals. Right? He says it can be denied by calling down the law of evolution. It can be admitted as a common practice, or it can be avoided by pragmatic reasoning. Talk around it. And this is what most professors in college are going to do. They're going to go off onto a different subject and leave the kids with his hand up. Teacher, you didn't answer my question. Well, we'll talk about that some other time. Let's go on and talk about evolution here. They don't want to admit it, but it's all based on circular reasoning. Are the authorities maintaining on the one hand that evolution is documented by geology, and on the other that geology is documented by evolution? Isn't this a circular argument? It certainly is. I like to ask evolutionists this question. I'll say, now, sir or ma'am, the geologic column contains layers of limestone, shale, sandstone, conglomerate, limestone. Notice there's limestone scattered through there several times. Limestone is a common rock around the world. If I hand you a piece of limestone, how do you tell the difference between 100-million-year-old and 600-million-year-old limestone? How would you know which it is? It's limestone. There's only one way they can tell which era it comes from. By the index fossils. Only way they can tell. This is a trilobite, and the textbook says a trilobite is a good index fossil because they lived 500 million years ago. I don't think so. There's a fossil of a human shoe print. What apparently is a shoe print where a fellow stepped on a trilobite. A geologist from Utah analyzed it and said, this is genuine, folks. This is a Human shoe print on top of a trilobite. They asked folks, they said, how could a human step on a trilobite? I thought they lived 500 million years ago. One guy said, well, maybe aliens visited the planet 500 million years ago. Oh, that could be, I suppose. Another guy said, well, maybe there was a large trilobite shaped like a shoe that fell on a small one. I don't think so. This is the rock containing a graptolite. Now, graptolites are supposed to be the index fossils for rock that is 410 million years old. This is called the New York State fossil. Look it up in the book. It was, if you found a rock with a graptolite and took it to any university and said, how old is this rock? The professor would say, oh, this is easy. This contains an index fossil. This rock is 410 million years old. Until 1993, when they found graptolites are still alive. Now think about it. If they're still alive, they could be found in any rock layer, don't you think? Textbook says the lobe-finned fish is the index fossil for rock that is 325 million years old. So if you find a rock and has a fish in there, and the fish has little bitty arms before the fins, called a lobe fin, that rock is 325 million years old. Until 1938, when they found lobe-finned fish are still alive. The coelacanth. They're swimming all over the Indian Ocean. Lots of them have been captured now. So apparently lobe-finned fish did not live 325 million years ago. But when the evolutionists are confronted with a problem like this, the theory is so thoroughly ingrained in them, the theory is unquestionable. What they said was, well, this just proves some of them survived for 325 million years. When they asked Dr. Mackel about the living dinosaurs in Africa, he interviewed folks that have seen them. He came back, wrote a book about it. The book's sitting there on the table. Dinosaurs still alive in Africa. He said, folks, there is no question. I've been there twice. He said, there are still some dinosaurs alive in Africa. And then he says, it's amazing they survived for 70 million years. The idea of even questioning the evolution theory never enters their mind. And I don't know why. It ought to. These index fossils are baloney, folks. Everything lived at the same time. God made everything in 6 days. He said he did several times throughout the Bible. And you know, they found dinosaur blood still inside the bone. They broke open some magnolia leaves, or broke open some rocks, and magnolia leaves inside were still green when the rock was cracked open. I took the tour today on the boat down to see the, what's the glacier we went and saw? Portage Glacier. The guy on the boat taking us down there on the boat said he used to work on the North Slope of Alaska. He was one of the cooks up there in Barrow, Alaska, or one of the towns up there. And he said they drilled down 1,200 to 1,600 feet and brought up frozen wood. He said he was the cook, and they brought him in this big chunk of wood, and it was still green. He said, we just brought this up from 1,600 feet down. He said it in his apartment, and after a few days it turned brown and dried out. He said it was still wet and green from 1,600 feet down. I'd like to get some of that, by the way. If any of you folks know anybody who works up on the North Slope, get me some of that wood. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about that wood brought up from way down deep up there. And we cover that, some more of that on my video number 6 about the Hovind theory. What they're going to do, they're going to tell the kids in school, and kids had to learn this today. They had to memorize the names, you know, Jurassic and Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, and all that. They're going to tell them each of those layers is a different age. It just can't be. Here's a petrified tree standing up, running through many different rock layers. Now think about it just for a minute. Petrified trees standing up. Here's me next to one in Yellowstone. These things are found all over the world. Thousands of petrified trees have been found standing up, running through multiple rock layers. They're found in many, many places in the country. I got all sorts of data on that. Now hold on just a minute. If you got petrified trees standing up, running through many rock layers, it looks to me like you got a problem. If you believe those rock layers are different ages, don't you? Sometimes the trees are upside down, running through many rock layers. Now you really have a problem. To the evolutionist, there's only two choices. Either the tree stood there for millions of years and didn't rot, or it grew through hundreds of feet of solid rock looking for sunlight. There's a third choice. The trees were buried in a big flood. How fast was that calf going? Maybe there's another way to look at this, folks. This geologic column does not exist any place in the world except in the textbooks, but in 1830, it changed people's worldview. People began doubting the earth was only 6,000 years old, and they began doubting their Bible way before Darwin came on the scene. Because they started to believe the earth is millions of years old, and that's why Christians, instead of standing by the truth, began to compromise with the gap theory, the day-age theory, progressive creation. Those all came in the early 1800s as a response to the geologic column and the great age for the earth. So Charlie Darwin graduated from Bible college to be a preacher when he was 22 years old, the only degree he ever got, and yet all the textbooks called Darwin a scientist. He was a preacher is what he was. Darwin couldn't get a job, so his dad pulled a few strings and got him on board the Beagle. He said, Charlie, I want you to sail around for 5 years. They're not going to pay you, but they will feed you. Take the job, son. It's the best offer we've had. So Charlie sailed around for 5 years, got paid nothing. As he sailed around, he collected bugs and birds. They called him a naturalist. He wasn't a naturalist, I suppose. He was just trained as in theology. But as Charlie sailed around, he brought with some books to read. He brought with his Bible, and he brought with that book that was just hot off the press by Charles Lyell, the one that mocked the Bible and the one that invented the geologic column. As Darwin read the book by Lyell, he began to lose his faith in the Bible. Later, Darwin said, disbelief crept over me slowly. He said, I felt no distress. He slowly lost his confidence in the Bible on that 5-year voyage by reading Charlie Lyell's book. As Darwin sailed around the world, he came to the Galapagos Islands, right there off the coast of Ecuador, South America. When he got to the islands, he noticed each island had a different type of bird. They were all the same species. It was a finch, but their beaks were different. Charlie hated birds. He shot everyone he could find because he loved worms. And he thought it was kind of mean for the bird to eat the worm, so he shot all the birds he could. And he collected these birds and put them into categories based upon their beak shape. He was an unusual fellow, Charlie was. He married his first cousin. Nobody else would marry him. He hated women, but we'll get into that later. But Charlie Darwin collected all these birds and said, you know what? I found 14 varieties of birds, and I think all the birds have a common ancestor. These birds, anyway. I bet you're right, Charlie. And I bet the ancestor was a bird. And then Charlie said, you know, maybe this proves that birds and bananas are related. You say, oh, he did not say that. Oh, yes, he did. I've got his book right there on the table. The Origin of Species, that's only part of the title. We cover the rest of the title on Seminar Part 5 about the real title to that book and the racism involved. But Charlie Lyell said in his book, Charlie Darwin said on page 170, it is a truly wonderful fact that all animals and all plants throughout all time and space should be related to each other. Now, excuse me just a moment. Don't you think that is implying that the birds and the bananas are related? Didn't that, anybody see, am I wrong about that? Somebody tell me if I'm wrong now. That's right, don't you think? Okay. Charlie said the birds are related to the bananas. Now here's the problem, kids. If you're going to go to school and they're going to start teaching you about evolution, let me tell you what you have to do. I've done over 40 debates, over 4,000 radio and TV call-in talk shows. I debate the skeptics and scoffers all the time. I have learned if you want to win the argument in the first 5 minutes, here's how you do it. When somebody says, do you believe in evolution? You have to respond by saying, what do you mean? Because there are several different meanings to the word evolution. Microevolution is indeed a fact of science. That tells us that dogs produce a variety of dogs, and roses produce a variety of roses, and birds produce a variety of birds. And you probably look different than your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents. Nobody argues with that. Microevolution is observed. It is a fact of science. It is also scriptural. So the Bible says what happened. You might get a big dog or a little dog, but it's still a dog. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. And nobody's ever seen a dog come from a non-dog either. And I'll tell you what, a dog, a wolf, and a coyote might have had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. But a 3-year-old can tell you it's the same kind of animal. Let's try it. We're going to put a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana on the table. Which one is not like the others? Who thinks they know? Yes, sir, in the blue shirt. Yes. The banana. And how old are you? Tough question. I understand. Think about it. Tell me later. A 3-year-old can tell you it's the same kind of animal. See, the Bible says they're going to bring forth after their kind, not species. 10 times in the first chapter, God said everything's going to bring forth after its kind. And nobody's ever seen an exception to that. The problem was they started looking for the origin of species, and that's not even where the problem should be. The problem is the origin of kinds. Actually, the word evolution has lots of different meanings. Cosmic evolution, that would be the origin of time, space, and matter, the Big Bang. Nobody has any evidence for that whatsoever. There's chemical evolution. If the Big Bang produced hydrogen, how do you get from hydrogen to the heavier elements? That's a whole other stage in evolution. They don't talk about that much, but that had to happen, according to their theory. Then you have stellar evolution. How do you get from all these chemicals flying around through space from a Big Bang into getting stars and planets and organized solar systems? That's a whole other phase of evolution. They don't like to talk about that. Then there's origin of life, organic evolution. How do you go from non-living material to life? Ultimately, the evolutionist has to believe in spontaneous generation, which is a fairy tale. It doesn't happen. It's been proven for years it doesn't happen. Sometimes in textbooks they have a whole chapter about how only life comes from life, the law of biogenesis, and then the next chapter says, but we think life evolved from non-living material. And they don't see the glaring contradiction. Then there's macroevolution. Once you get life to form, you have to get it to produce a different kind, which has never been observed. And then, of course, we do have microevolution, which does happen. So there are actually 6 different meanings to the word evolution, only one of which is scientific. All the rest of which are ridiculous, they don't happen, they've never been observed, it's not science. But somehow, brilliant minds are taught number 6, and then they believe in all the rest of them. And I don't understand how the devil can fool people like that, but the devil has them fooled, that's for sure. Charlie observed microevolution, and then he believed in macroevolution. Macroevolution tells us a dog and a rose have a common ancestor. And the ancestor was a rock. I was in a debate one time. I mentioned in the debate, I said, you evolutionists believe we all came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. This lady came to me afterwards. She was very upset. She said, Dr. Hovind, tonight you said we believe we came from a rock. We do not believe that. I said, well, ma'am, where did we come from? Do you believe in evolution? She said, oh, yes, I do. I teach here at the school. I said, okay, where did we come from? She said, we came from a macromolecule. I said, where did that come from? She said, it came from the oceans in the prebiotic soup. I said, where did that come from? She said, well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. It slowly dawned on her. You know, I do believe I come from a rock, don't I? Yes, ma'am, you do. I wouldn't be ashamed of it. I mean, if you believe it, teach everybody. Now, if you stop and think about it, though, it's silly. And I think the devil has you fooled, and the devil's laughing at you for believing in it. But if it's enough to keep you from going to heaven, you don't care. Whatever works. The devil's using that theory to send folks to hell. Macroevolution is based upon imagination. It's a fantasy. It doesn't happen. But teachers in school will give kids thousands of examples of microevolution and then lead them to believe that the rest of them are all true. And that's where the deception comes in. In advertising, it is illegal. It is called bait and switch. If I ran an ad in the paper, new Mercedes, $10. People would line up for 10 miles down the street to get one, wouldn't they? And when they showed up and knocked on the door, hey, Mr. Hovind, I'm here for my Mercedes. Here's my $10. I say, man, look, I just sold it. How about come look at this Cadillac for $40,000? They'd have me locked up in a few minutes, wouldn't they? Bait and switch. And yet, guess what happens every day in the public schools in your town? They bait the kids to believe in evolution, but they switch the meaning in the middle of the textbook. They will say, boys and girls, evolution means descent with modification. You look different than your parents and grandparents. Well, that's true. And if that's what you really mean by evolution, then I believe in it. But they switch it. Midstream, they switch it to include the other stuff, you know, cosmic evolution, organic evolution, Big Bang, all that stuff's included, when really the only part that's scientific is the first part, the little minor changes within kind. I come from Illinois, corn country. Did you know there are so many kinds of corn, they have to number them? You'll be driving down the highway and you'll say, here's a BX65, you know, don't mix it up with BX42, something will blow up. But folks, you can crossbreed your corn from now till the cows come home and you're always going to get corn. You're never going to get a hamster or a tomato or a whale to grow on that corn stalk. It won't happen. That's a minor variation. There's varieties of dogs, and they probably had a common ancestor. a dog. That's not evolution. There's varieties of cows, and they probably had a common ancestor, and it was a cow. There's a lot of variations, but it's still the same kind. See, variations happen, but they have limits. This is what the evolutionist doesn't want to admit. Farmers have been trying for years to breed for bigger pigs. Don't they try to get the biggest pig they can get? Do you think they'll ever get a pig as big as Texas? No, I bet there's a limit in there someplace, isn't there? See, variations happen, but they have limits. Roaches gradually become resistant to pesticides. Do you think they'll ever become resistant to a sledgehammer? Probably not. I bet there's a limit in here someplace, isn't there? And variations have limits. Also, the second thing, they produce the same kind of animal. That's not really evolution. It's a variation of what you already had. Thirdly, the information for the variation was already present in the gene pool. You might get a bigger pig or a smaller pig if you're breeding for pigs, but you're never going to get a yellow one or a purple one. The information isn't there to produce that. You don't produce, nothing new is created. Only a part of the gene pool is selected, that's all. For instance, Chihuahuas are the result of somebody spending years and years and years crossbreeding dogs to finally end up with a 100% useless dog. How long would the Chihuahuas last out in the woods? Turn all of them loose out there in the woods. They'd run up to the wolf. Yep, 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 yep. End of gene pool, right? A useless dog. When you get a variation like a Chihuahua or a Great Dane or a Doberman, genetic information is lost, not gained. All you've done is taken this incredible gene pool and selected a slice of it. That's not evolution. Creationists agree with natural selection. We agree with the variations. Yes, they happen, but they're not going to produce anything new. Darwin hoped they'd find these variations, but they've never been found. Never been found, not at all. But what happened in the late 1700s, James Hutton, he took away the Earth being 6,000 years old. People started believing it must be older than that. Along came Charlie Lyell. He took away the flood and said, oh, the flood didn't cause these layers. Millions of years did it. And then Charlie Darwin came along and took away the Creator. And by the mid-1800s, the world was left with no Bible they could trust. And the history of the rest is terrible to read. With the rise of communism, socialism, Marxism, the Nazism, the New World Order, I cover all that on video number 6 about this, what's happened because of this theory of evolution. And those three same false teachings are still in textbooks today, used in this town. Made up a couple hundred years ago, never been true, aren't true today, but they're still used in textbooks right now. Now, kids like to learn. I like to teach. I taught school 15 years. Love teaching. And it's normal for kids to love to learn. But what's not good, though, is we've got things in the textbooks that are simply not true. I can understand if somebody believes in evolution, they're going to want everybody else to believe in it. I understand that. I'm trying to convert you to believe like I believe. That's what teaching is. Okay? But to use false information or outdated information or just bold-faced lies, that's not good. Certainly shouldn't be paid for by the taxpayer. Let me show you a few things in the textbooks that your books are teaching right here in this town that are not true. They're going to tell the kids, we've got evidence for evolution. By the way, there is none. We'll give $250,000 if anybody's got some. See my website, drdino.com, and see my $250,000 offer for evidence for evolution. There is none, I assure you. But they're going to tell the kids evolution comes from two sources. Two faulty assumptions it's based on. Mutations are going to make something new, which never happens, and natural selection is going to make it survive. Now, it's true mutations happen, and it's true natural selection works, but neither one is going to work for evolution. This textbook says mutations provide the variations. Oh, really? Well, variations happen, but they're limited. Here's a 5-legged bull. He can't run any faster. By the way, notice the bull got an extra leg. He didn't get a wing or a feather or a beak. Doesn't the bull already have the gene pool information to make a leg? It just built one in the wrong place, didn't it? It didn't add any new information. Here's a short-legged sheep. Notice what the textbook says. This mutation would not last in nature. Of course not, man. He's the first one the wolf is going to catch. Go, boys, go. Here comes the wolf. Brrr. No, Herman didn't make it. Here's a two-headed turtle. That's called a mutant. Not ninja, mutant. Now he's going to freeze first winter. Nobody makes a double-neck turtleneck sweater. I've been looking, folks. They are out of stock permanently, apparently. See, a mutation is actually a scrambling of information that pre-exists. It's like taking letters from the word Christmas and scrambling them up, and you can get a whole bunch of different words out of Christmas. But you're never going to get Xerox, zebra, or queen. The letters aren't available. And mutations do not create anything new. They create a new combination of what already existed, but not new information. Textbook then says natural selection is going to cause evolution. Now, wait a minute, wait a minute. The creationists agree natural selection happens. We thought of it first. But it doesn't create anything new. It's a conserving process. It keeps the species strong, and that's all it can do. It can't create anything new. Don't let them tell you that it can. If you worked in a factory that produced cars, isn't it normal for a factory to have a quality control section? Before the car goes out the door to sell it, they check it, don't they? Suppose the guys that are checking the cars caught every single mistake. They don't, by the way. But let's suppose they did. How long would it take that process to change the car to an airplane? You say, now, Brother Hovind, you don't understand. Quality control doesn't change the product. It keeps the product good. That's my whole point. Natural selection doesn't change the product. It keeps it a good what it was. That's all. Natural selection makes the birds stay good birds and the fish stay good fish, but it doesn't turn one to the other. Natural selection has nothing to do with evolution. And actually, survival of the fittest does not explain arrival of the fittest. Doesn't how it got there. Worse yet, survival of the fittest is what's called a tautology, a sentence that means nothing. I'll show you. Why did it survive? Because it's the fittest. Oh, how do you know it's the fittest? Because it survived. You can go around a long time on that one, can't you? And by the way, it's not always survival of the fittest. If a whale goes through a school of fish and eats 80% of them, it's actually survival of the luckiest. What amazes me, though, is some of these scientists are able to make good observations and still come to silly conclusions. Maybe you heard the story about the scientists that were going to see how far the frog could jump. They put this big old bullfrog down and they said, "Jump, frog, jump." Four-legged frog jumped 80 inches. They brought him back, cut off one leg. Said, "Jump, frog." He only jumped 70 inches. They brought him back, cut off another leg. Said, "Jump, frog." He only jumped 60 inches. They brought him back, cut off another leg. Said, "Jump, frog." He only jumped 50 inches. They brought the frog back, cut off his last leg. Said, "Jump, frog." You know, they expected he'd go about 40 inches based upon the graph. He actually jumped 0. They were baffled. They did the experiment again. A new frog. They got the same results. Every time they did the experiments, the results went 80, 70, 60, 50, 0. They got all the scientists together to analyze the data. And they said, "Now, folks, we got a problem here. The frog jumped less as the legs were removed." That's a good observation, isn't it? But they said something strange happened. When we got to 0 legs, he didn't move at all. Maybe this means a frog with no legs goes deaf. No. Good observation, bad conclusions. You know what they did for years? They took fruit flies, because they get a new generation every 11 days. Grow up, get born, grow up, get married, have kids in 11 days. Live fast. Or they did all sorts of made these flies have mutated babies. They nuked them and microwaved them and x-rayed them, and they got all sorts of mutated flies. They got flies with curled wings. They fly around, couldn't go anywhere. They got flies with no wings. What do you call that? A crawl? He can't fly. After raising all sorts of mutated flies, somebody said, "You know, we got observations to make here. All the mutations we got were worse off than Grandpa Fly." Good observation. They said, "This proves that flies have evolved as far as they can go." Oh, man, bad conclusion. Jump, frog, jump. Maybe you could conclude that God made the flies right the first time. Wouldn't that be a reasonable conclusion to draw from the data? spend thousands of tax dollars trying to raise flies, and all you got was flies that are worse off. Maybe God did a good job to start with. Then they did the thing with the peppered moth. How many have ever heard of the peppered moth experiment? I guarantee it's in your textbooks right here in this town. By the way, the whole thing was proven fake about a year ago. The guy had to take moths and glue them to the trees to take the pictures to prove his point. That's another story. But what they actually found, in England, the trees have lichens growing on them, makes them kind of a light color. And the moth has two different colors of babies, dark and light. They counted the moths on the trees. Must have been a government project. And they found out it was 95% light-colored moths and 5% black. Then they went around factories where they were burning coal and the trees turned black. They counted the moths again. They said, actually they faked the whole thing. But they found out it was now 95% black moths and 5% light. They said, see, proof for evolution. The white moth evolved to a black moth. No. You see, when the tree turned black, the white moth lost his camouflage. He stuck out like a sore thumb, and he got ate by a bird. It's not evolution at all. What you have here is a classic case of natural selection, if it would have been a case of that. Actually, it's a fake. But even then, it's not evolution at all. Started off a moth, it ended up a moth. That proves we all came from a rock, boys and girls. That's what they said. The moth population shifted from mostly white to mostly black. Good observation, fellas. The population was able to adapt to the new environment. Another good observation. This helps prove we all came from a rock. Bad conclusion. Jump, frog, jump. They even make the kids do activities. Boys and girls get a large sheet of black paper, 1 meter square. Oh, by the way, folks, I like to kick this dog every time I walk by. Did you know all the new textbooks are metric? Now, I understand the metric system. I taught physics. I'll take a metric quiz against anybody you know. But I'm not sure I want a kid coming to help build my house that doesn't know what a 2x4 is. So instead of getting your paper 1 meter square, if you're a patriotic American, make yours 39.37 inches square, just to fool them, okay? And then it says get 200 white circles and 200 black circles and cut them out and fill them on the paper. Okay, now boys and girls, we're going to see who can pick up the most in 1 minute. Ready, set, go. Well, of course, you're going to pick up the white circles off the black paper. You don't need to be a genius to figure that out. They're going to say, see, boys and girls, this helps prove evolution. No, teacher, this helps prove we got extra money to waste in our school district. We just cut up a whole bunch of good paper and threw it on the floor. Actually, the peppered moth is proof of intelligent design. God wants to make sure those little moths survive regardless of what happens to the background. That's called planning ahead. Did you know Ford and General Motors, and I believe Honda, put heaters and air conditioners, both, in some of their cars? I've seen them. I drove one. How many of you have ever seen one like that? Has both a heater and an air conditioner. Anybody ever seen one like that? Yeah. Now hold on a minute. Doesn't a heater and an air conditioner do the opposite thing? Would you say it's dumb to put them both in the same car? No, that's called planning ahead, right? You don't know if it's going to go to warm climate or cold climate, so you put them both in there. And God gave that little moth the gene pool to produce dark and light babies so that it can survive in a variety of climates. That's not proof for evolution. That's proof for creation. Then they tell the students in school to think critically. Now look at this question carefully, kids, or you'll get fooled. It says, boys and girls, do you think humans are still evolving? Well, what kind of question is that? That's one of those questions like, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Oh, now, hold on a minute. If I say yes, I'm admitting that I did. Right? If I say no, well, then I'm still doing it. Right? Now, doesn't the question they asked the kids originally assume that evolution happened? Do you think humans are still evolving? That is not a question to teach them how to think. That is a question to subtly teach them what to think. That's a Soviet-style indoctrination type question. They're not teaching them to think critically at all. But when the kid leaves class, he thinks he knows how to think. And he doesn't. He knows how to parrot what he's been taught. And now those people that went through this are teaching in the universities, teaching the next generation to do the same thing. And none of them know how to think at all. They know how to think that what they've been taught is right, but that's as far as it goes. When they see dinosaurs still living, they say, wow, this proves they lived 70 million years. No, stop and think a little deeper than that. Maybe your whole theory's wrong. Then they tell the kids they have evidence from structure. This is called the homology argument. They will say, boys and girls, you have two bones in your wrist. They're called the radius and the ulna. I know about that. I broke both of mine a couple times. They're going to say, now, boys and girls, look at the whale. The whale has two bones in his front flipper. And guess what, boys and girls? They're called the radius and the ulna. Wow. Who named them, teacher? The whale? All these animals have similar forelimb structures. And look what the book says. Boys and girls, comparative anatomy provides further evidence of evolution. It says, the commonality suggests these and other vertebrate animals are all related. They probably evolved from a common ancestor. Hold on, excuse me, just a minute. Might be two ways to look at that. How fast was that calf going? Anyway. Maybe this proves they all had the same designer. Maybe the same guy designed them all. Wouldn't that make sense? Same designer, similar structure? Yeah, makes perfect sense. But that's not what they tell the kids. They tell them it's proof for evolution. Here's what they say. Boys and girls, many animals have similar structure. Good observation. They must have had a common ancestor. Right there, bad conclusion. This helps prove we came from a rock. Real bad conclusion now. And they're going to tell the kids, we've got evidence from development. Now, there aren't many things about the evolution theory that make me any madder than this. So I'm going to try to stay calm while I explain to you what they're telling the kids here. Darwin was convinced by looking at the embryonic stages of animals that he had chosen the right theory. He came up with this theory anyway with zero evidence to back it up and published his book in 1859. This textbook says, by the way, the BSCS series is one of the worst there is as far as evolution teaching. If your school district uses books from BSCS, it probably has more evolution than any other publisher available. This book says, the similarity between the stages of the early development of many different animals helped convince Darwin that all forms of life shared common ancestors. Excuse me. First place, this isn't true. But if there are similarities, it might prove they have a common designer. This textbook points to the folds of skin under the chin of the embryo, and it says these are gills. Gill slits like a fish? Those are not gill slits. Those little folds of skin in the embryo later develop into bones in the ear and glands and bones in the throat. They have nothing to do with breathing. I've seen fat people with 5 or 6 chins. They cannot breathe through any of them but the top one. Those are not gill slits. Never has anything to do with breathing. Who came up with this idea? Anyway, actually, a German fellow named Ernst Haeckel did this. In 1859, he read Darwin's book, actually 1860, he read the book and became convinced Darwin was a genius. Darwin said, we will find evidence for my theory. 1869 came around, 10 years after his book was printed, and they still had zero evidence in 10 years. Haeckel got kind of worried. He said, you know, I think I'm going to help Darwin out. I'm going to make some evidence for evolution. Now, Haeckel was an embryologist. He studied embryos of different animals before they're born. Haeckel took the drawing of a dog and a human embryo at 4 weeks development, and he changed them. He made them look just alike. He lied. On top are the real drawings. Underneath are his fake drawings. Haeckel made huge posters of his fake drawings and traveled all over Germany and just about single-handedly converted the German population into believing in evolution with a lie. Here is the actual chart that Haeckel made. All sorts of different animals, and he made their embryonic stages look just exactly alike. Haeckel finally was convicted at his own university. They held a trial. In 1874, he was convicted of fraud. 125 years ago. Now keep that in mind. On top are Haeckel's drawings. Underneath are actual photographs of those animals at the same stage. Haeckel lied. Big time. But in 1999, University of West Florida in my town, Pensacola, Florida, used a book called Evolutionary Analysis, which still had Haeckel's drawings in there as evidence for evolution. Proven wrong in 1874? Yep, still in the books today. Colt Biology, 1994 edition, tells the kids that embryo has gill pouches. Glencoe Biology says there are gill pouches on the human embryo. Not true. This book used at Troy State University A major biology textbook. Universities all over America use this book, and it still tells the kids they have gill pouches. This one tells the kids the embryo developing in the mother at 7 months looks like a tiny baby, but it is not. It's not a baby at 7 months. Excuse me, but a lot of babies born at 5.5 months survive. Much higher percentage than that at 7 months can survive. Why are they doing this? Why do they call it a fetus? The angel of the Lord said, "Behold, thou art with fetus." No, thou art with child. The reason this lie is kept in the textbooks is that's the only way to justify abortion. They want the kids to believe it's not a human yet. See, the devil wants to reduce human population. And he's done a good job with this abortion thing. Abortion is murder. We'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, Satan wants to reduce the population down to 0. He hates people. And he's got some of his buddies in the New World Order convinced that they ought to reduce it to 500 million. What they don't know is, when they get done doing his work for them, he's going to eliminate them also. We covered that earlier about eliminating the population of the earth. They want to simply wipe out people. And we covered that on video number 1 about the age of the earth. But the human embryo is a human the instant it's conceived. Maybe you heard about Anna Rosa. She was a botched abortion. They cut her arm off. They thought they'd killed her. She was born anyway, missing an arm. Everybody says, well, that's terrible. Oh, yeah. What if they would have cut her head off instead? Would have been fine then, wouldn't it? It happened today to 4,500 kids in America. 4,500 babies were murdered today. It's going to happen again tomorrow. It's going to happen every day. Been going on for 30 years. The Bible says, "Cursed be he that taketh reward to slay an innocent person." And all the people shall say, Amen. Amen. It's murder. I live in Pensacola, Florida. You might have heard of my town. We've had 2 doctors shot and killed, several clinics blown up or burned down. I did not shoot any doctors, and I did not burn any clinics down. And I don't think Jesus would do it that way either. He grew up under Roman control. He didn't go around blowing up tanks and burning down bridges. But the doctors were murderers, plain and simple. When the first doctor got shot, I was preaching in Fort Lauderdale. So the next day I was flying home. Right in front of me on the airplane were 2 of the ladies, I'm sorry, 2 of the women, from NOW, National Organization for Wild Women. They were going to fly to Pensacola and march around town, hold up their signs, pro-choice, pro-choice. Have you noticed the news media and the textbooks always call them pro-choice, but they call us anti-abortion? Watch for that. That's called a negative slur in journalism. Nobody wants to be an anti. How about if they call us pro-life and call them pro-death? Or pro-life and anti-life? How would that be? Yeah. It's all a matter of how they phrase it. You got to watch for that. Anyway, we're getting off the plane. I noticed these ladies, women, had on their shirt in huge block letters, "Choice above all." So, being my mild-mannered self, I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, what does this mean, choice above all?" She said, "We believe a woman ought to have right to choose." I said, "Choose what?" She said, "Choose if she wants to have an abortion. It's her body, you know." Well, yes, ma'am, if she wants to abort her body, I suppose that's fine. It looks to me like she wants to abort somebody else's body, though. I said, "Ma'am, I'm kind of curious about this. I got 3 kids. I delivered one of my kids at home. I taught biology and anatomy. I used to raise hamsters. I'm kind of familiar with this process." I said, "Would you please tell me, why does the woman's right to choose stop at birth? Why don't we let her choose to kill the baby after it's born? It'd be a lot safer and simpler." I got an idea. Let's extend abortion rights up until the kid is 2 years old. I know a lot of folks with a 2-year-old that have thought about it a time or two. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but I know you're out there. Hey, I got a brilliant idea. Let's extend abortion rights up until the kid is 18. I bet they behave a lot better. "Johnny, one more time and I'm going to abort you, son." "Teacher, where's Johnny today?" "Well, Johnny didn't do his homework last night, so his mommy aborted him." Hey, grades would skyrocket, folks. Well, the ladies didn't want to talk about it anymore, so I don't know what the matter was. They went and got their luggage, and I went and got my luggage. And I got standing there talking to a cameraman. He showed up from Chicago to film the rally. I thought, hold on a minute. 6 people are going to march around town, and it's going to make worldwide news? You can get 100,000 people to line your streets against abortion, and it won't make the news. Have you noticed that? I got talking to the cameraman, and I said, you know, I think there's 2 things wrong with what happened to this doctor. He said, oh yeah? What's wrong? I said, well, there should have been a trial first. Nobody should be shot without a fair trial. I said, secondly, the state of Florida should have shot him. Griffith shouldn't have shot him. You know, the media never seems to get the point, do they? Remember when the kids got shot in Denver, Colorado? The news media jumped all over the gun control issue, didn't they? They missed the entire point, on purpose, I believe. The real issue is not, should we have more gun control? The real issue is, should we have public schools? Huh? Yeah. Or maybe the real issue is, should we teach the kids in school you're nothing but an animal? Maybe that's the real issue. Maybe should we teach them there's no moral absolutes? Maybe we should stop teaching evolution. Maybe that's the issue. Let me get this thing turned back on. There we go. Maybe that's the issue we should be. Maybe the issue is, should certain criminals be publicly executed? That'd stop a lot of this shooting, wouldn't it? Maybe another issue is, maybe all law-abiding citizens should be required to carry guns. Yeah. Suppose every teacher in public school was required to carry a gun. How far down the hallway would those 2 kids have gotten? Not very far, right? Now, I'm not saying I recommend it or not. I'm just saying they looked at the wrong issue. That's why I don't like to support the liberal media. I get a call about once a month. You can ask anybody in my staff. Brother Hovind, what happens when the Pensacola News-Journal calls? They'll laugh. They'll say, oh, we hand the phone to Brother Hovind. I pick it up. Hello, this is Brother Hovind. And they'll say, Mr. Hovind, we're calling from the Pensacola News-Journal. We wonder if you'd like to take the paper. I say, no, ma'am, we don't have a parakeet. What? You'll figure it out in about 3 days. Here's the logic they used to justify abortion. They're going to say, well, it's not a human. I'm sorry, that's not true. That was proven wrong a long time ago, 1874. Better get up to date on your science. They're going to say, well, it's not viable. It can't live on its own. Well, neither are you viable stark naked on the North Pole. Is the baby viable after it's born? I mean, think about that logic. Just because it can't live on its own, we have the right to kill it. Oh, really? I know kids that are 25 that still come borrow money from Dad. Hey, Dad, can I borrow some money? You ought to be able to live on your own by now, son. Justifiable homicide. How about this? The child may be unwanted. There's kids that are already born that are unwanted. Should I go around and kill all of them? My parents moved 4 times when I was growing up, but I found them every time. How about this? They're going to say, well, the child might be a financial burden. Oh, well, show me a kid that's not. Every kid's a financial burden. How about this? Well, it might be... They're going to say it might be from rape or incest. Oh, well, then you kill the rapist, not the baby. You see, you execute the rapist and adopt out the baby. It's real simple. One doctor got upset with me one time. I was speaking on this subject in his church, and he said afterwards, he said, now, Dr. Hovind, I'm a medical doctor. I have a question for you. If a woman is raped and gets pregnant, should she be forced to carry that baby? I said, well, sir, that is a terrible thing. I understand. But let me ask you a couple of questions before I answer yours. Suppose a woman is raped and gets pregnant and has the baby. 5 years later, she's holding her 5-year-old, trying to cook supper, and the kid is acting up, and it reminds her of the horrible experience. So she takes the steak knife and kills the 5-year-old. Is it murder? He said, well, yes. I said, okay. Suppose it's 5 months after the baby's born, and she kills it. Is it murder? He said, well, yes. I said, okay, suppose it's 5 minutes after it's born. Is it still murder? He said, yes. And I think he figured out what my next question was going to be. Suppose it's 5 minutes before it's born. Yep, still murder. You know what you ought to do? In Alaska, you ought to pass a law that says if a woman goes to have an abortion, the doctor or the nurse will have a jar full of marbles that they're going to choose from. We're going to have a lottery here. We're going to give the kid a sporting chance. Okay? They're going to have a jar full of marbles. One of them is labeled baby, one of them is labeled mother, and one is labeled father. To see which one gets killed. Hey, wait a minute. I'm not done. We're going to give the baby even a better chance. We're going to put a few more marbles in there. One's going to be labeled governor and one labeled president. You reach in, you pick out a marble to decide who dies. Isn't it illegal to go hunting with spotlights and shoot animals at night? Isn't it illegal? Don't you have to give them a sporting chance? Where are the environmentalist wackos when we need them, folks? Here we are murdering babies that can't say a word. Have we gone crazy? Where's the logic in all of this? They're going to say, well, abortion's legal. Well, that doesn't mean it's right. 1936, the German Supreme Court declared Jews are not persons. So when Hitler's guards were killing the Jews, it was perfectly legal. Let me ask you a question. Was it right? No. Did their logic hold up at the Nuremberg trial? No. They said, hey, it was perfectly legal. We were just obeying orders. Yeah, but it's wrong. And you might go around saying abortion's legal, but it's wrong. And you're going to be judged for murder when you stand before God. Now listen carefully. If you've had an abortion, and some good close friends of mine have, that doesn't mean God doesn't love you. God still loves you. Now what you did was wrong, and you ought to admit it. Half the Bible was written by murderers. Just read it, okay? Everybody in this room has done something wrong, right? Anybody that hasn't, please raise your hand. Okay? We're all sinners. What I don't want you to do, though, is go through life justifying abortion. You ought to say, oh, it's terrible, it's a sin, God forgive me, and then get on and serve God with your life. Okay? It's too late. You blew it. Okay, it's too late. I'm sorry. Now, go serve God. He can still use you in an awesome way. It's not over with. But don't justify it, whatever you do. Now, in 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court declared the unborn is not a person. Now, what the U.S. Supreme Court did on that day is wrong, and they are going to face God for that stupid decision. They are responsible for the millions of murders. People say they would have done it anyway. Well, yeah, it was illegal at least. It would have stopped a lot of people from doing it. You don't legalize something because they're going to do it anyway. Why do we have any laws at all then? People say you can't legislate morality. That's all legislation is trying to legislate morality. Every law tries to legislate morality. Don't give me that you can't legislate morality. Yes, you can. That's what we're trying to do. In Revolutionary War, 25,000 Americans died. World War II, 400,000 died. Since we started the war on the unborn, 38 million have died. 1 billion worldwide. Did you know nearly 20% of the entire population of the world has already been killed by abortion? Satan's having a heyday, getting what he wanted, eliminate the population. Margaret Sanger started a group in 1916 called Planned Parenthood. Anybody ever heard of that before? The purpose of Planned Parenthood was to eliminate the inferior races. She was a racist. She hated blacks, Hispanics, Indians, anybody who wasn't white Aryan. She was an Aryan supremacist. She wanted to eliminate the inferior. She called them weeds. She said the most merciful thing you can do to an infant is to kill it. Pretty nice, Margaret. Hitler referred to the Jews as a parasite in the body of nations. The Planned Parenthood folks refer to the unborn baby as a parasite in the mother's womb. I wonder where they got that idea. Margaret Sanger hated Negroes. She said, we don't want the word to get out that we're trying to exterminate the Negro population. It's racist, folks. Today they have a Negro president, I think to help hide their agenda, but they still want to eliminate the inferiors. In 1952, this document was published, How to Plan Your Children, answering questions about birth control. Is it an abortion, they said. In 1952, they responded by saying, definitely not. An abortion requires an operation. It kills the life of a baby after it has begun. It is dangerous to your life and health. It may make you sterile. Boy, have they changed their tune in 40 years, haven't they? You know, I'm convinced after a long study of this subject, Satan is just using the evolution theory to lead people to hell. That's all. He just hates humanity, physically, emotionally, spiritually, every way. He just hates us, folks. And the devil is laughing at you if you believe in evolution. He's only telling you that lie to see how dumb you are and see if he can get you to believe in it. He doesn't believe it. And if you do, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. There's not a shred of scientific evidence to back it up. In the next section, we'll show you more lies in the textbooks and what you can do about it. How to get the evolution out of your local school district. Get it out of the books. Totally. Everybody ought to get involved in that. I think probably more important, you just ought to get your kids out of the school, period. Homeschool, private school, or no school at all. Just get them out. I think that'd be smarter yet. So after the break, we'll talk about more lies in the textbooks and what you can do about it.